The morning sun rose over Prime, painting the Galactic Naval Academy in shades of gold and silver. The massive space station orbited the peaceful garden world, home to some of the finest military minds in the known galaxy. Cadets from dozens of species walked the gleaming corridors, their uniforms pressed and perfect. In the main briefing hall, Commander On stood before a gathered crowd of students. His blue skin shimmered under the lights as he pulled up a holographic image. The image showed a massive warship, twisted and dark, floating in space like a dead thing. "This is the battle cruiser that was damaged 3 years ago," On said. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen many failures. 6 different species have tried to repair it. All have failed. The best engineers in the galaxy have declared it beyond saving. The cadets murmured among themselves. They were known across the stars for building ships that could survive almost anything. Their battle cruisers were legends. To see one reduced to scrap was unsettling. "Today you will board this vessel in teams," On continued. "You will assess the damage and write reports on what you find. This exercise is designed to teach you an important lesson. Sometimes technology is too damaged to save. Sometimes you must know when to give up." A cadet raised one of her 4 arms. "Commander, why has no one succeeded in repairing it?" On pulled up another image showing the ship's internal systems. The power core shut down to protect itself during the battle. They designed their ships with systems so complex that restarting them requires technology we simply do not have. The neural interface needed to restart the core was destroyed. Without it, the ship is nothing but metal and broken dreams. The cadets nodded seriously. This was why they came to the academy, to learn the hard truths about warfare and technology. The doors at the back of the hall burst open. 4 figures stumbled in, covered head to toe in dark grease and smelling of machine oil. The other cadets turned to stare. Lieutenant led the group, his brown hair sticking up in odd directions. Behind him came Cadet Lisa Turner, wiping her hands on her already filthy uniform. Cadet Danny Price followed, carrying a toolbox that clanked with every step. Last came Cadet Grant, her face smudged but her eyes bright and alert. "Sorry we're late, Commander," said, not sounding very sorry at all. "The shuttle bay door was stuck again." On's expression hardened. That door was marked as broken. Maintenance was scheduled for next week. "Well, it works now," Danny said with a grin. "Just needed someone to actually look at it instead of scheduling reports." A few cadets from other species whispered to each other. The humans had only been at the academy for 6 months, but they had already earned a reputation. They touched everything. They took things apart. They ignored safety warnings. They came from Earth, so dangerous that simply surviving there made them different from everyone else. On assigned teams to different sections of the dead warship. He saved the humans for last, his tone making it clear what he thought of them. "Lieutenant, your team will take the engine core and primary systems." He paused. "I expect a thorough report on why the ship cannot be repaired. Do not touch anything unnecessarily. Do not attempt any repairs. You are there to observe and learn." Nodded slowly, but his eyes had already taken on a distant look. Lisa was smiling in a way that made the cadets nervous. Danny was already thinking about what tools he would need, pulled out her and started making notes. At dawn the next day, the teams boarded shuttles to the dead warship. It hung in space like a ghost, its hull with blast marks and radiation burns. As they approached, the sheer size of it became clear. The battle cruiser was over a kilometer long, built for war and crewed by thousands. Inside, emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. The air was cold and still. Most teams immediately began setting up their scanning equipment, taking readings from a safe distance. The humans walked right up to the nearest wall and started opening panels. "What are you doing?" a team leader asked, his voice full of disbelief. "You're contaminating the site." Had his hands deep in a tangle of wires. "Can't fix what you don't touch." "We're not here to fix it," they said. "We're here to document why it can't be fixed." "Sure," Lisa said, but she was already crawling into a maintenance shaft. The other teams shook their heads and went back to their careful, proper scanning. The humans spread throughout the ship like water finding cracks. They opened things that were sealed. They tasted coolant to check its composition. They pressed their ears against hull plates to listen for stress fractures. Danny found himself in the weapons bay, running his hands over silent cannons. "These aren't even damaged," he called out. "They're just locked down." The power core is in protective shutdown, his voice echoed from somewhere deep in the ship. But it's not dead. The shutdown sequence worked exactly as designed. Climbed down into the engine room, a space so large it had its own weather. Condensation dripped from pipes overhead. The massive core sat silent in the center, a sphere of dark metal covered in strange symbols. He walked around it slowly, looking at every connection, every conduit, every panel. They had built this to last forever, but they had also built it in a way that made sense only to them. "Hey," Lisa's voice came through his communicator. "I'm in a space that shouldn't exist according to the ship's blueprints. There are backup systems here that none of the other teams found." "Because they were scanning instead of exploring," replied. He knelt down and opened a floor panel. Inside, he found power conduits that twisted in patterns that made no logical sense, unless you stopped thinking like a human and started thinking like a. They came from a world where they evolved in perfect safety. They built their ships the same way. Everything was sealed, distributed, protected. They never expected anyone to work on their ships with bare hands. They never imagined someone would need to trace a wire by feel through a dark corridor. But humans came from Earth, a world that tried to kill them every single day, a world of storms and earthquakes and predators. Humans learned to fix things with whatever they had, wherever they were, no matter how dangerous. The other teams were finishing their scans and leaving. They had their data. They had confirmed what everyone already knew: the ship was dead. The team leader stopped by the engine room on his way out. He found sitting on the floor surrounded by open panels, next to him with her showing system maps, Danny hanging upside down from a pipe checking connections, and Lisa somewhere in the walls judging by the clanking sounds. "You're wasting your time," they said. "Every expert in the galaxy has looked at this ship." Looked up, his face serious. "Commander On said we have until sunset, right?" "Yes, but—" "Then we have time," stood up and faced the directly. "Can you ask the commander for one thing? Tell him to leave us alone until sunset. We need to work." The laughed. It was not a kind sound. "You think you can fix what the greatest minds in the G? The humans began their work in silence. Each one moved with purpose, like parts of a single machine. They had worked together for months now, learning each other's rhythms and instincts." Descended deeper into the engine core, leaving the safety of the main chamber. The space became with each level. Most species would have stopped when the corridors required crawling. Kept going. He reached a junction where 3 power conduits met. According to the ship's original design, this junction should have been accessible only by engineers in full environmental suits. But they were larger than humans, with 4 arms and bodies built for reach rather than flexibility. Squeezed into the space and examined the conduits by touch. The metal was cold against his skin. He could feel the faint vibration of residual energy, like blood still flowing through dead veins. "These aren't broken," he said into his communicator. "They're locked." "Same here," Danny replied from the weapons bay. "Everything is in safe mode. The ship didn't die, it went asleep." His voice crackled through the comm. "I'm mapping the control systems. They designed everything backwards from how we think. Where we centralize control, they distribute it. Every system has backup nodes scattered throughout the ship." "That makes it nearly impossible to restart," Lisa said. She was in the bridge now, staring at a command console that looked like it had been grown rather than built. "You'd need to restart every node in the right sequence. It would take weeks." "Unless you restart them all at once," said slowly. Silence filled the comm channel. They all understood what that meant. Restarting all systems simultaneously would require massive coordination and perfect timing. One mistake and the power surge could destroy whatever system still worked. "We'd need to access every control node manually," said. "The automated systems are down." "How many nodes?" Danny asked. 47 major ones, hundreds of minor ones." More silence, then spoke again, his voice steady. "We focus on the major nodes, get them working, and the minor ones will follow. We have 8 hours until sunset." In the Academy's observation deck, Commander On watched the camera feeds with growing concern. His assistant, a young named Eth, stood beside him. "Should we stop them?" Eth asked. "They're opening sealed systems. They're not wearing environmental suits. They're violating 17 different safety protocols." On watched squeeze through a space that looked impossibly small. He watched Lisa climb across a gap using pipes that might not hold her weight. He watched Danny reach into a power conduit that still held a charge. "No," On said quietly, "let them work." "But Commander, if they're injured." "I know," On turned away from the screens, "but I want to see what they do." Back on the ship, the humans had divided the work, would handle the engine core and main power systems. Lisa would tackle the bridge and navigation. Danny would manage weapons and defensive systems, would coordinate everything, moving between positions to ensure they worked in sync. They moved through the ship like ghosts, finding spaces and passages that other teams had missed. They had built their ship for durability, not convenience. Maintenance tunnels twisted in impossible directions. Control panels were hidden behind structural supports. Everything was sealed because they never expected anyone to work in a normal atmosphere. But humans were small, flexible. They could bend and squeeze into places that would trap larger species, and they came from Earth, where working in dangerous conditions was just called work. Found the main plasma injector 2 levels below the core. It was completely misaligned, thrown off by the force that had shut down the ship. The alignment would require precision measuring equipment and robotic arms to fix, equipment they did not have. He looked at the injector, then at his hands. Then he climbed inside the mechanism. The space was barely large enough for his body. He had to twist at an angle that made his back scream. He could feel the heat from the residual plasma, hot enough to blister skin. Slowly, carefully, he began to turn the alignment rings with his bare hands. "Your heart rate is elevated," said over the comm. "Are you okay?" "Just hot," replied through gritted teeth. "How are the other nodes?" "Danny has cleared 12 weapon nodes. Lisa has navigation responding. I've restored life support to basic functions." Paused. "We might actually do this." "Don't celebrate yet." Finished aligning the first ring and started on the second. Sweat poured down his face. "We still need to restart the core itself." That was the problem they all knew was coming. The core required a specific harmonic frequency to restart. The original engineers had used biological neural interfaces, connecting their minds directly to the ship. When the interfaces were destroyed, so was the ability to restart the core. Every expert who had examined the ship had stopped at this point. There was simply no way to generate the required harmonic without neural biology. By midday, curious cadets began returning to the dead warship. Word had spread that the humans were actually attempting repairs. Most came to watch what they assumed would be an entertaining failure. They found the humans everywhere, was covered in coolant, his hands bleeding from rough metal edges. Lisa had burns on her arms from hot conduits. Danny was hanging from a weapon's mounting, rewiring control systems with techniques that made engineers shake their heads. Moved between them all, her showing systems coming online one by one. "Why don't you wear gloves?" a cadet asked Danny. Danny looked down at her from his upside-down position. "Can't feel the voltage through gloves. Need to know when a wire is live before I touch it." "That's insane. You could be electrocuted." Danny grinned, his teeth very white against his dirty face. "Only if I'm careless." He reached out and touched a conduit. Sparks flew. Danny jerked his hand back, shook it once, and then touched a different wire. This time, no sparks. He nodded and began connecting it to the node. The cadet backed away slowly. In the engine room, had finished aligning the plasma injector. He crawled out of the mechanism, his uniform soaked with sweat and coolant. His hands shook from muscle fatigue. Lisa appeared with a water container. "Drink." He drank, then looked at the core. "How many nodes are active?" 43 of 47, reported. "We're running ahead of schedule." "Then we have time to solve the big problem." Sat down on the floor, the others gathered around him. They all looked terrible. Burned, bruised, covered in fluids that probably weren't safe. But their eyes were alert and focused. "The neural interface," Lisa said. "We can't recreate biology." "No," agreed, "but maybe we don't need to." He pulled out his own and called up the harmonic sequence required to restart the core. It was complex, a series of frequencies that had to be generated in perfect rhythm. They used neural interfaces because their brains naturally operate on these frequencies, said. But humans have something they don't, neural plasticity. We can train ourselves to recognize and reproduce patterns. Danny leaned forward. "You want us to manually create the harmonic?" "It's possible. Lisa has perfect pitch. You have perfect timing, can calculate the exact sequence, and I can coordinate." It would require touching live power conduits, said slowly. The electrical feedback would be significant. Significant, Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. It would probably stop our hearts. Met her eyes, probably, but human hearts restart. We evolved that way because of lightning on Earth. Our cardiac systems are designed to recover from electrical trauma. They all sat in silence, understanding what he was proposing. They would have to take potentially lethal electrical shocks, trusting that their biology would save them. Commander On will never approve this, Danny said. Then we don't ask permission, replied. More silence, then Lisa stood up. Let's do it. Danny rose next. I've been shocked worse fixing Earth electrical grids. Was last, she looked at her burned hands, then at her team. We came here to prove something. This is our chance. The first surge of electricity threw Danny backward into a support beam. His body convulsed once, then went still. The watching cadets screamed. Several started toward him, but Danny's eyes snapped open. He gasped, coughed, and crawled back to his position. Again called out. They touched the conduits a second time. The harmonic was closer now, but still wrong. The ship responded with a deep groan that resonated through the hull. Station sparked violently. Fire erupted from the panel in front of her. She threw herself to the side, but not before the flames caught her hands. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. Stop, an instructor shouted from the observation area. Wrapped her burned hands in torn pieces of her uniform and returned to her position. The sequence is stabilizing. Don't stop now. Felt his heart hammering in his chest in a rhythm that did not match his pulse. The electricity was doing something to his nervous system. Everything felt too bright, too loud, too sharp. This was what dying felt like, he thought. The edge right before the body gave up. Commander, the frantic voice of Eth echoed through On's communicator. The humans are killing themselves. You have to stop this. On watched the screens in silence. He saw his body jerking with each pulse. He saw Lisa's nose bleeding from the neural feedback. He saw Danny collapse and rise, collapse and rise. He saw working with hands that should be in a medical bay. Send security, On said finally. But even as he gave the order, something made him add. Tell them to wait at the entrance to the engine room. Do not interfere unless I give the direct command. But Commander, those are my orders. On the ship, Lisa maintained her position even as blood ran down her face. Her perfect pitch had never been tested like this. She had to hear frequencies that existed only in her mind, then translate them into physical reality through the electrical pulses. The harmonic was building. She could feel it now, a rhythm that matched something deep in her bones. They had designed this frequency to match their own biology, but all life in the universe shared certain patterns. Hearts beat, neurons fired, energy flowed. Third pulse in 5 seconds, called out. His voice was hoarse. This one will be stronger. How much stronger? Danny asked. Strong enough to either restart the core or kill us. Looked at each of them in turn. No one will blame you for stopping. Yes, they will, Lisa said. She smiled through the blood. They'll blame us for being cowards. Not the galaxy, said softly. Us, we'd blame ourselves. Danny laughed, a sound that came out more like a cough. Come on, Earth kids don't quit when things get hard. Felt a sudden surge of emotion so strong it hurt worse than the electricity. These were his people, his team. They came from a world that tried to kill them every day, and they learned that the only way to survive was to never give up. On my mark, he said. He started the countdown. Around them, the ship began to respond. Systems that had been dark for 3 years flickered with life. The core began to emit a low hum that grew with each passing second. The gathered crowd fell silent. They understood now that they were watching something historic, not just a repair attempt, something more, a test of what humans could endure. Commander On arrived at the engine room entrance. Security officers stood beside him, ready to pull the humans away. But On raised his hand, signaling them to wait. He looked through the doorway and saw the 4 humans positioned around the core. They were barely standing. Their bodies showed the damage from repeated electrical trauma. Any sane being would have stopped long ago. But humans were not sane, not by galactic standards. They came from a world where stopping meant dying. Now shouted. All 4 humans grabbed their conduits at the same moment. The electrical surge was massive, far stronger than before. had routed emergency power through all 4 positions, overriding every safety limit. The feedback was brutal, felt his heart stop. Actually stop. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 years, his heart did not beat. Then it kicked back to life with a jolt that arched his spine. Danny's nervous system fired randomly. His arms and legs moved without his control. He bit his tongue so hard he tasted copper, but he held his position. His burned hands pressed against the conduit even as the flesh cooked further. She screamed, a sound of pure agony, but she did not let go. Lisa felt something in her brain break. Not physically, something else. A barrier that protected her mind from overstimulation. The harmonic frequencies poured directly into her consciousness, bypassing all her filters. She saw colors that did not exist. She heard sounds from the edges of reality. She understood for just a moment what it was like to feel the ship as an extension of your own body. Then she understood something more, the reason they could restart their ships easily. They were connected to them, but humans had something different. Humans had survived by being separate from their environment, by standing against nature rather than flowing with it. "The harmonic is wrong," Lisa screamed over the roar of energy. What could barely hear her over the sound of his own heartbeat. "We're trying to match the frequency, but we're not. We need to impose our own rhythm." Understood in an instant. They had been trying to speak the ship's language, but the ship was dead. It could not speak. They needed to command it in their own language. "Override the harmonic," he shouted. "Force it to match us." Lisa changed the frequency she was generating. Instead of trying to match the perfect rhythm, she imposed a human heartbeat. Irregular, imperfect, alive. The ship screamed. Metal groaned. Conduits overloaded and burst, spraying coolant into the air. Half the watching crowd ran for the exits. But the core began to glow. Deep in its center, where exotic matter compressed space itself, light appeared. It was faint at first, like a dying star, then it grew brighter and brighter. The 4 humans pushed harder, forcing more of their own life rhythm into the dead machine. Their hearts beat together now, synchronized by the electrical pulses. 4 hearts, 1 rhythm, pouring life into metal and plasma. The core ignited. Light exploded through the engine room, so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. The deep hum became a roar, then a song, a sound like the universe itself taking a breath. Power cascaded through the ship. Dead conduits flared to life. Dark corridors blazed with light. Systems that had been silent for 3 years began to wake, one after another, faster and faster. The 4 humans collapsed. They hit the deck hard, their bodies finally surrendering to the damage. Smoke rose from their uniforms. Their hands were destroyed, burned down to exposed nerve endings. Their hearts beat erratically, trying to find their normal rhythms again. But they were conscious, barely, and they were smiling. Commander On ran into the engine room, his medical training overriding his rank. He knelt beside, checking his pulse. "You're alive," On said, and he sounded surprised. Coughed, tasting blood. "Told you, human hearts restart." "The core is online, Commander," whispered. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were alert. "Power at 40% and climbing." On looked up at the glowing core. Lights were coming on all around them. He heard the distant sound of systems initializing, one after another, like a symphony building to its crescendo. "You actually did it," he said softly. "You brought it back to life." "Not done yet," Danny mumbled. He tried to sit up and failed. "Ship has power, but systems are still offline. Weapons, shields, navigation, all need calibration." On shook his head. "You need medical attention. This exercise is over." Forced himself to his hands and knees. Everything hurt. His body screamed at him to lie down and not move for a week, but he looked at the chronometer on the wall. 5 hours until sunset. "We said we'd have it battle-ready by sunset," said. He looked at his team. "We don't quit." Lisa managed to sit up. Blood still ran from her nose, but she wiped it away. "The pilot systems need someone who understands human reflexes to calibrate them." "The weapons array is 90% functional," Danny added. "Just needs manual alignment." Pulled out her with shaking hands. "Life support is at 30%. I can get it to 90 if I have 2 hours." On stared at them. They were destroyed. Broken. Any reasonable being would accept medical care and celebrate what they had already accomplished. But these were humans, from Earth. And on Earth, reasonable meant dead. Medical drones arrived within minutes. They sprayed synthetic skin on the humans' burned hands and injected them with stimulants to keep them conscious. It was battlefield medicine, designed to keep soldiers fighting when proper care was impossible. Stood on shaking legs and looked around the engine room. Power was flowing, but that was only the beginning. The battle cruiser was a complex organism of interconnected systems. Each one needed to be brought online carefully, calibrated, and tested. "We need help," he said. The watching crowd had grown larger. Cadets from every species stood in doorways and corridors, their training exercises forgotten. They had come to watch humans fail. Now they stood silent, awed by what they had seen. "Any volunteers?" called out. At first, no one moved. Then a cadet stepped forward. She was young, her blue skin showing the darker bands of adolescence. "I can help with sensor calibration," she said. "My species has exceptional spatial mathematics." An engineer raised two of his forearms. "We excel at biological systems. Life support is within our expertise." More cadets began volunteering, offered their strength for structural repairs. A group of silicate students, beings made of living crystal, said they could optimize the ship's communication arrays. Within minutes, had assembled a crew of 30 cadets from 8 different species. He assigned them to different parts of the ship, putting each species where their natural abilities would be most useful. But the humans took the most dangerous positions. They went where the radiation was highest, where the electrical systems were most unstable, where working meant accepting risk that would make other species pause. Lisa climbed into the navigation array, a spherical chamber at the front of the ship. The navigators had sat here, their forearms working multiple controls simultaneously. She had only 2 arms, but she had something they lacked. Human eyes evolved for tracking fast movement across long distances. She could see patterns in stellar drift that others would miss. She began the calibration sequence, manually aligning each sensor array. The work was delicate. One mistake and the ship would not know where it was in space. "Navigation array online," she reported after an hour. "Accuracy within 0.03%. In the weapons bay, Danny worked with 5 cadets. The weapons systems were functional, but the targeting solutions were calibrated for reflexes. He needed to reprogram them for faster human reaction times while keeping them accessible for other species. "The plasma cannons need manual alignment," Danny told the. "Can you handle the heavy lifting while I work the fine adjustments?" They exchanged looks. Manual alignment meant going inside the weapon mounts while they held residual charges. It was dangerous work. But they had watched the humans take electrical shocks that should have killed them. They had seen what determination looked like. "We can do it," the lead said. They worked together, human and alien, combining their different strengths. The 4 arms could brace the heavy components while Danny crawled inside the mechanisms. His smaller human body fit where theirs could not reach. Coordinated everything from the bridge, her burned hands wrapped in medical gel that let her work despite the pain. Her showed a schematic of the entire ship, with systems coming online in cascading waves of green light. Life support reached 50%, then 60%. They worked with an efficiency that impressed her. They understood biological systems in ways humans could only study. The cadets completed the sensor array calibration in half the time expected. Their mathematical minds processed spatial data faster than any computer. The silicates optimized the communication systems using principles had never considered. As beings made of crystal, they understood resonance and frequency in fundamental ways. She realized something important. The humans had started this, but they could not finish it alone. They needed every species here, each contributing their unique perspective. She called over the comm. "We're actually going to do this. All systems are coming online." In the engine room, monitored the core. Power output had stabilized at 70%. That was enough for full operations, with reserve capacity for emergencies. He ran diagnostics on the plasma distribution network. The humans' rough repairs showed everywhere. They had used techniques that would make engineers weep, but the techniques worked. Sometimes, elegant design mattered less than practical solutions. "Shield generators are charging," a cadet reported. The massive being stood next to the shield emitters, having used his strength to realign the heavy components. "Containment field is holding steady." Checked the readout. The shields were at 95% efficiency, more than enough for combat operations. Test the shields at 20% power, ordered. They activated the generators. A blue shimmer appeared around the ship, visible through the windows. The shield envelope was complete, with no gaps or weak points. The gathered crowd cheered. It was the first time many of them had made a sound in hours. They had been watching in silent awe as the impossible became real. Commander On stood on the bridge looking at the command console that Lisa had repaired. Every indicator showed green, weapons ready, shields operational, navigation locked, life support at 90% and climbing. "How much time?" he asked. "1 hour until sunset," replied. On shook his head slowly. A battle cruiser, declared dead by the finest engineers in the galaxy, brought back to life by 4 humans and a volunteer crew in 1 day. "Technically, we're not done yet, sir," said. She pulled up another diagnostic screen. "We need to test the engines. Can't call it battle-ready if it can't move." "The engines haven't fired in 3 years," On said. "Starting them could tear the ship apart if anything is misaligned." "Then we better make sure everything is aligned." His voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "That's why we have an hour left." Emerged from the engine room, his uniform so stained and torn it barely qualified as clothing anymore. He made his way to the bridge, nodding to the various cadets working at different stations. "Engine room is ready for startup sequence," he reported. "But sir, I recommend you evacuate all non-essential personnel if something goes wrong." "Everyone stays," a voice said from the doorway. They turned to see Admiral, the Academy Commandant herself. She was a legend, one of the few living warriors who had flown ships in combat. She walked onto the bridge with slow, measured steps. "This was my sister's ship," the Admiral said quietly. She touched the command console with something like reverence. "The Blazing Dawn, she died defending a colony world, and this ship was all that remained of her." The bridge fell silent. "I was told it was," Admiral continued. "I accepted that. Some things cannot be repaired." She looked then at each of the humans in turn. "I was wrong." "Ma'am, we haven't tested the engines yet," said. "The ship might not fly." "Then I want to be here when we find out." The Admiral sat in the captain's chair. It had been designed for a body, so she looked small in it, but her presence filled the bridge. "All hands prepare for engine test," she commanded. Her voice carried the weight of decades of command. "Helm, are you ready?" Lisa sat at the pilot's station, her hands hovering over controls she had only just learned. "Ready, ma'am." "Engineering. Core is stable at 70%, reported. Power distribution is nominal, ready to transfer power to engines." "Weapons. All systems green," Danny called from the weapons bay. "We can fight if needed." Admiral smiled. It was a fierce expression, full of old memories and new hope. "Then let us see if the Blazing Dawn can fly again." She nodded too. He input the command sequence, routing power from the core to the main engines. The ship groaned as systems that had been dormant began to wake. The engine ports glowed faint blue, then brighter. The glow became light, then fire, then streams of plasma that pushed against the dead weight of the vessel. Slowly, impossibly, the battle cruiser began to move. It lifted away from its docking cradle for the first time in 3 years. External cameras showed the massive ship rising, shedding debris and ice as it climbed. On every deck of the Academy, students and instructors ran to windows. They watched as the dead warship came to life, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Lisa worked the controls with growing confidence. The ship responded smoothly to her commands. She guided it away from the Academy, out into open space where there was room to maneuver. "All systems responding normally," reported. "No stress fractures detected, power consumption within expected parameters." "Take us around the station," Admiral ordered. "Let everyone see what these cadets have accomplished." Lisa brought the ship around in a slow, graceful arc. The Blazing Dawn flew as if it had never been damaged, its hull gleaming in the light from Prime. On the Academy observation decks, the watching crowd erupted in cheers. This was more than a repair. The sun was setting over Prime when the Blazing Dawn returned to the Academy. The ship moved through space with a grace that belied its size, responding to Lisa's commands as if it had been built for human hands. Admiral sat in the captain's chair, her expression unreadable. She had been silent for the entire orbital pass, watching the systems perform, checking every indicator. Now, as they approached the docking bay, she spoke. "Full diagnostic," she ordered. Brought up the complete system report on the main. Every major system showed green. Weapons were at 97% efficiency. Shields held at 96%. Navigation was precise within 3 decimal points. Life support was stable at 92%. The engines, which experts had said would never fire again, burned clean and steady. "Run a weapons test," the Admiral said. "Low power targeting the old debris field at Mark 37. Danny's hands flew over the weapons console. Targeting solutions locked, weapons ready. "Fire." The plasma cannons spoke for the first time in 3 years. Brilliant blue bolts of energy crossed space in less than a second. The old debris, left over from decommissioned ships, vaporized under the precise fire. "All weapons systems performing within normal parameters," Danny reported, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. Admiral stood. She walked to the and placed her hand against it, looking out at the stars. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned to face the bridge crew. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "My sister died 3 years ago on this bridge. She stayed at her post while the crew evacuated, keeping the shields up until the last transport cleared. By the time she could leave, it was too late." The Admiral paused. "I thought this ship was her tomb, that it would drift forever, a monument to her sacrifice." She looked at Lisa, at Danny, and at the other cadets from different species who had worked together to achieve the impossible. "You gave me back more than a ship," she said. "You gave me back a piece of my sister. For that, you have my eternal gratitude." Felt his throat tighten. He had not thought about what this ship meant to anyone beyond the engineering challenge. He had not considered that it carried memories, that it represented someone's family. "Ma'am, we were just," he began. "You were just refusing to accept defeat," the Admiral interrupted. "You saw a problem that everyone else said was impossible, and you solved it through determination, innovation, and cooperation." She smiled. "That is exactly what the Galactic Union needs." The blazing dawn docked smoothly. As the airlocks opened, the bridge crew emerged to find the main hangar packed with people. It seemed like the entire academy had gathered. The crowd was silent at first. Then someone began to clap. The sound spread like a wave through the hangar. Within seconds, hundreds of beings from dozens of species were applauding, whistling, and cheering in their various ways. The 4 humans walked down the ramp side by side. They looked terrible. Their uniforms were destroyed. Their skin was burned and bruised. They moved slowly, each step clearly painful. But they walked with their heads high. Commander On met them at the bottom of the ramp. For a moment, he simply looked at them. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He saluted them. "Lieutenant Cadets Turner, Price, and Grant," he said formally. "On behalf of the Galactic Naval Academy, I apologize." Blinked in surprise. "Apologize, sir." "I assigned you this task expecting you to fail," On said. "I wanted to teach you humility, to show you that human determination has limits. I was wrong." He lowered his salute. "You did not need to learn humility. I needed to learn respect." "Sir, You brought a dead ship back to life in less than 1 day," On continued. "You did what experts from 6 species could not. You risked your lives repeatedly, and you did it not through technology or superior knowledge, but through sheer refusal to give up." He paused. "That is what makes you dangerous, not your strength or your aggression, your absolute refusal to accept defeat." Danny laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. "Is that a compliment, sir?" On almost smiled. "Yes, Cadet Price, it is." Admiral stepped forward. "I am recommending all 4 of you for immediate advancement. You will graduate at the end of this term with full honors. Additionally, you will receive commendations for exceptional service." "Ma'am, we broke 17 safety regulations," pointed out. 23, the Admiral corrected. "I checked, and normally that would result in disciplinary action." She looked around at the gathered crowd. "But you also accomplished what I thought was impossible. You showed every student here what can be achieved when we stop accepting limits." She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "For too long, the Galactic Union has valued safety over achievement. We have become comfortable, predictable. We have forgotten that our ancestors built this civilization through bold action and calculated risks." The crowd listened in absolute silence. "Earth is a," the Admiral continued. A planet so hostile that simply surviving there requires constant adaptation. The humans who evolved there learned lessons we have forgotten. They learned that sometimes the only way forward is through, that sometimes you must risk everything to gain anything. She looked at the four humans. These cadets did not ask permission to save this ship. They did not form committees or write proposals. They simply did what needed to be done, consequences be damned. She smiled fiercely. That is the spirit we need in our fleet. The crowd erupted in cheers again. This time it was different. It was not just appreciation for an achievement. It was recognition. The other species were beginning to understand what humans brought to the galaxy. Not just strength or aggression, something more fundamental. The ability to look at the impossible and see a challenge rather than a barrier. Felt his legs starting to give out. The stimulants were wearing off and his body was demanding rest. He swayed slightly. Lisa caught his arm. Medical bay. Medical bay, he agreed. The four humans made their way through the crowd. Other cadets reached out to touch them as they passed, as if physical contact could transfer some of that human determination. A young cadet stopped them. She was the one who had first volunteered to help. How did you know you would succeed? She asked. Thought about it, we didn't. Then why try? Because the alternative was giving up, Lisa said, and we're not good at that. The cadet nodded slowly, processing this logic that was so foreign to her species. On her, knowing when to stop was considered wisdom, but humans came from a place where stopping meant death. Different worlds, different lessons. In the medical bay, human doctors worked to repair the damage. The burns would heal in time. The nervous system trauma would take longer, but they would all recover. Human bodies were built to survive. Think we'll get in trouble? Danny asked from his bed. Probably, said. She was looking at her hands, which were wrapped in regenerative bandages. But it was worth it. Do you think other species will understand? Lisa asked. Why we did it? Consider the question. Some will, the ones who want to understand, others never will. He looked at his team. But that's okay. We didn't do it for them. We did it because we're human, and humans don't leave things broken if we can fix them. In the Academy's command center, Admiral stood with Commander on, looking at the blazing dawn through the window. The ship sat in its new dock, lights blazing, systems humming. Alive. What do we do with it now? On asked. We fly it, the Admiral said simply. It will be the Academy's training ship. Students will learn what it means to serve on a vessel that refused to die. She turned to face on. And every time they board it, they will remember what 4 human cadets accomplished in a single day. You're making them legends, On observed. I'm making them examples, the Admiral corrected. The galaxy is changing, Commander. New threats are emerging. Old enemies are growing bold. We need warriors who can adapt, who can overcome, who refuse to accept defeat. She gestured toward the medical bay where the humans rested. Earth has given us that. Now we must learn from them. 2 weeks later, stood on the observation deck looking at the blazing dawn. His hands had healed, though the scars remained. He would carry those marks for the rest of his life. The ship had been officially renamed the Persistence. The name was perfect. It captured everything the ship represented now, not just engineering, but the human refusal to accept defeat. Lisa joined him at the window. They're offering us permanent positions as instructors. I know, said, what do you think? I think we came here to learn, not teach, she smiled. But maybe showing others what's possible is a kind of learning too. Danny and arrived together. They had all been released from medical supervision, cleared for full duty. So, Danny asked, are we staying? Looked at his team. They had been through something that most beings would never experience. They had pushed themselves to the absolute limit and discovered that their limits were further than anyone thought possible. We stay, he decided, but on one condition. What's that? Asked. Pointed at the Persistence. Next time they give us an impossible job, they let us do it our way from the start. The 4 of them laughed. It hurt their still healing bodies, but they did it anyway, because they were human from Earth and pain was just another thing to push through. Outside the window, the sun set over Prime. The Persistence sat in its dock, battle-ready and waiting. A dead ship brought back to life by 4 cadets who understood a simple truth. Impossible was just another word for not yet. The Galactic Union was beginning to understand what Earth already knew. When you need something fixed, you call in the experts. But when you need the impossible done by sunset, you call in the... And you get out of their way. This was a resurrection. A ship that every expert said was dead now flew again, brought back by the determination of 4 humans and the cooperation of dozens of cadets from across the galaxy. Commander On stood at a window, watching the blazing dawn complete its orbit. Tears ran down his blue cheeks, though he did not wipe them away. "I thought the exercise would teach them humility," he said to Eth. "Teach them that some things are impossible." "What did it teach them instead?" Eth asked. On turned away from the window. "That impossible is just a word." "If you die," On said slowly, "I will have to explain to your families why I let you continue." Met his eyes. "If we quit now, we'll have to explain to ourselves why we gave up." On stood. He looked at the 4 humans, then at the glowing core, then back to the humans. He made a decision that went against every regulation in his training. "You have 5 hours," he said. "Use them well." They moved to the power nodes surrounding the core. Each took a position at a different conduit. The gathered crowd of watching cadets grew larger. Some called out warnings, others simply stared. Counted down from 3. When he reached 0, they all reached out and touched the live conduits at once. The electricity hit them like a physical force. "Could not in one day." Didn't answer, he just looked at his team. Danny dropped down from the pipe and landed on his feet, closed her. Lisa emerged from the wall, covered in even more grease than before. They all wore the same expression, not confidence exactly, something harder, something that came from surviving on a world that never stopped trying to kill you. The left still laughing. He told the other teams what the humans had said. Soon, everyone was laughing, except for Commander On, who watched the humans through remote cameras and felt something he did not want to name. It looked almost like worry.